I'm Pat McCoy. I'm president of the Iron Council for the Arts. I got a few things to cover with you. First, the director is Dr. Michael Strayer, and you can go ahead and give him a nice round of applause. And his lovely wife and professor of music history at Marshall is Dr. Vicki Strayer. She will be our narrator. And together they're going to tell you all you ever wanted to know and then some about brass bands. Later this month or early in May, we will start our annual season subscription and fundraising drive. Those of you that bought season tickets this year, if you bought them early, you get a chance to buy them early for this coming season. Good news is we're not changing our ticket prices. I think they're the best bargain in the tri-state. $15 per show, $50 per ticket, $15 for a season ticket for 6 concerts. That's a pretty sweet deal. I do want to thank our season sponsors, Edward Jones of Ironton and Ashland, Marathon Petroleum, Gold Street Automotive, Tri-State Surgery Center, UK King's Daughters, Desco, again, of Ashland and Ironton, McCown and Fisher, attorney at law, licensed professional attorneys, and Dr. and Mrs. Pat McCoy. So that's all I have to say. I'm ready to play. So, Dr. Michael Strayer.
Good afternoon. We are the brass band of the Tri-State, and we welcome you to our concert this afternoon. The work you just heard was a fanfare by English composer Ralph Vaughan Williams. The work was originally titled Flourish for Wind Band, and it was the overture to a pageant entitled Music and the People that was performed on the 4th of April in 1939 at the Royal Albert Hall. The pageant, organized by the Popular Front, had 2 goals. The first was to raise money for the victims of the Spanish Civil War, and the second was to celebrate the workers of Great Britain. It was part of a 3-day festival of music, and the pageant included music by some of the most prominent young composers of the day, including Elizabeth McConkie, Alan Bush, and Alan Rawsthorne. On the evening after the pageant, concertgoers were treated to a new work by Benjamin Britten, who is the composer of our next selection. Benjamin Britten wrote the opera Gloriana for the celebration of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in June 1953. Set in Elizabethan England, the opera explores the relationship of Queen Elizabeth I and Robert Devereux, who was the Earl of Essex. It was based on Lytton Strachey's 1928 book, Elizabeth and Essex, A Tragic History. The portrait of Elizabeth I in the opera was not flattering. She ends up unwigged and utterly alone at the end of the opera, having had the head of Essex forcibly removed from his body. Well, this gave some of the minor nobles pause at the work's premiere, which they attended alongside Elizabeth and Philip. They were not altogether certain that the work was appropriate for a coronation, but Elizabeth II, who had been crowned just 6 days prior, absolutely loved it, and she became a champion of the composer. So, Britain wanted to capture the flavor of the English Renaissance in the opera, so he composed 2 lute songs for the character of Essex to perform, and included a scene at Elizabeth's court in which there was dancing. It's a very famous scene in which Elizabeth takes the dress of Devereux's wife, has her remove her dress, takes it, and then puts it on herself and dances La Volta with Essex. It's pretty racy. At any rate, Britain's amanuensis Imogen Holst, who was the daughter of composer Gustav Holst, researched many of the Renaissance dances that were in vogue at the time of Elizabeth, and she learned the dance steps and then taught them to Britain, including the Moorish dance, also known as the Morris dance. Does anyone here do Morris dancing? Do we have any Morris dancers? Any bells? Antlers, sticks? No? I tried. They wanted Morris dancers. Right. I tried. All right. In this suite of dances drawn from the opera, you will hear authentic dance rhythms from the English Renaissance, but with quite modern harmonies. Having gone back in time a little bit, let's now visit a landscape in the county of Worcestershire in central England. The town of Malvern and its surrounding region dates to the 11th century when a group of Benedictine monks established a priory at the bottom of the Malvern Hills. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, Malvern, from the Welsh Moel Burren, meaning bald hill, gained a reputation as a spa town because of its springs and the reported medicinal powers of their waters. English composer Philip Sparke, he's one of the brass band world's best known composers, wrote his Malvern suite in 1984 after he visited Hereford and Worcester during the famous Three Choirs Festival. The work depicts some of the most important sites near Malvern, including Worcester Cathedral, parts of which date back to 1084, the River Wye, which flows just west in the city of Hereford, and Gloucester Market. Each of these places, Worcester, Hereford, and Gloucester, are sites of the venues for the Three Choirs Festival. Thank you so very much. We'll be back after a short interval. Thank you very much, and welcome back to the second half of our concert this afternoon. That was the Cross of Honor, a British-style march composed by William Rimmer. The work was performed in the movie Brass off about a brass band competition. Rimmer was the son of a bandmaster of the Lancashire Volunteer Rifles. He was a cornet soloist and brass band educator in the late 1880s and early 20th century. He was also the conductor of the very famous Black Dyke Mills Brass Band, which is one of the finest brass bands in Great Britain. Our next tune also featured quite prominently in the movie Brassed Off, but if you haven't seen the movie, I really don't want to spoil it for you by telling you when they play it. But it's by Percy Grainger, an Australian-born composer. From 1901 to 1914, he lived in London and made his living as a concert pianist. He moved here to the United States in 1914 and served as a bandsman during World War I and became an American citizen then in 1918. But while he was in London, he was a mainstay of the folk music movement in the early 20th century. He went out into the countryside in Britain and recorded songs performed by people who had learned them through the oral tradition. But Grainger did not collect Irish tune from County Derry, as he called it. A woman by the name of Jane Ross of County Londonderry did the collecting before 1855, and she published it as Londonderry Air. Another version of the tune, dating from the 1790s, was called The Young Man's Dream. But although it has been published with many, many different texts over the years, we know the tune as Danny Boy. next composer may not actually need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Reggie Dwight, who is more famously known as Elton John, actually studied piano at the Royal Academy of Music. We don't often think of rock musicians as having a classical background, but he did. He met lyricist Bernie Taupin in 1967, and the rest, one might say, is history. It remains one of the most successful partnerships in popular music, perhaps because of Taupin's devotion to Elton John, even through the composer-performer's struggles with addiction. In addition to his well-known popular music works, which are actually too numerous to mention, Sir Elton John has also composed music for musicals, including The Lion King, Aida, and Billy Elliot, the musical. He has won more Grammy Awards than just about anyone, as well as an Emmy, an Oscar, and a Tony. Oh, it's pretty hard to follow that, but we'll endeavor to do so. David Marlott is a versatile Canadian trumpet player and composer who performs in orchestras, brass bands, chamber groups, and jazz groups. He has over 800 arrangements to his credit. He wrote his samba, A Coconut Named Alex, in honor of a young trumpet player named Alex McCarthy, who warmed up before any rehearsal using the tune Coconut Champagne, a Bill de Blasio tune made famous by jazz trumpeter Maynard Ferguson and his band. In fact, you will hear that tune as the basis of this work. Before we perform this last tune, we want to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And now, A Coconut Named Alex.